The entire fleet has just initiated the jump. It's going to take us a solid hour to reach the Seganine system. And in the meantime, the whole crew is locked in preparation mode. Down in the hangar deck, the crew is frantically prepping the fighters because the Admiral wants 6 full squadrons ready to launch the instant we drop out of jump space. The pilots are all going through their usual pre-launch routines. Some are deep in prayer, whispering to their various gods, while a few others are actually sharpening blades, just in case they crash and have to fight hand to hand. Others are just sitting quietly, lost in their own little worlds, while still more are meticulously double-checking every piece of gear and every instrument. Everyone has their own way of dealing with the waiting game. Then, navigation came over the fleet-wide comms. Stand by. 10 minutes until emergence. That was the signal. The pilots instantly finished up, rushed to their fighters, and strapped themselves in. Get ready for the jump. The fighters were locked in. Pushed into the colossal launch tubes, the blast doors slammed shut behind them. Even before the first wave was fully secured, the next set of fighters was already moving into position, ready to take their spot. It was an incredibly delicate, choreographed balance. A beautiful chaos where every single person knew exactly their job, down to the millisecond. Then, the calm was shattered by the navigational officer's voice booming fleet-wide. 30 seconds from normal space. You could feel the shift as the massive launch systems began to fire up, vibrating through the deck plates beneath your feet. A moment later, the familiar shuddering groan as the ship ripped back into normal space. And then they launched. The fighters were gone, rocketing into the void. Immediately, the launch tubes recycled, the blast doors dropped open, and the next waiting wave was pushed forward, the doors sealing tight behind them. The cycle began again, relentless and precise. It was a sight to behold. I just had to see the launch procedures go down, but now the clock is ticking. Time to hit the armory and get prepped, just in case they scramble us for a launch of our own. The moment I stepped through the hatch, the radio traffic hit me. It was the battle with the 32nd Fleet, and it did not sound good. In fact, it sounded like the 32nd was scattered across the entire system. I walked over and flipped on the tactical screen to watch the deployments. Every ship from the 32nd looked pinned, with at least 2 Ramarsi cruisers dedicated to attacking each one. The Admiral is facing an impossible decision right now. I sat down and started sorting my gear, keeping one eye glued to the screen. Suddenly, we saw our main fleet split wide, pivoting to engage 2 smaller battles directly ahead of us. Things are about to get intense. With the Ramasri ships out of the way, the surviving vessels from the 32nd Fleet fall in behind us. Shielded by our formation, they can finally begin damage control, tend to their wounded, and scramble to get their systems back online. But their losses are staggering. As we closed in on 2 more skirmishes, we watched in horror as one of their battleships succumbed to the relentless enemy fire. It exploded, a brilliant, tragic flash, taking its entire crew with it. That loss forced one of our wolf packs to divert, and while they're making short work of the enemy, the sheer distance between these engagements is costing us precious time. The Admiral just made a risky call, split the wolf packs into smaller units to cover more ground. It's a massive gamble, but it's the only chance we have to save what's left of the 32nd. Let's hope it pays off. Our fleet is now completely fractured, splitting into 4 distinct battles across the void. But here's the interesting part. The Ramarsi never launched any fighters. So, our entire fighter wing, those fearless squadrons, they took initiative and launched a 5th engagement all by themselves. They look like angry hornets attacking a skyscraper. They can't really hurt those massive Ramarsi behemoths, but they are making noise. The Ramarsi ships noticed them immediately and have actually redirected their main batteries, pulling fire off our battleships and trying to swat down our tiny fighters. This is critical. It's buying us precious seconds. Our battleships are using that distraction to reposition, aiming to bring their few remaining functional guns to bear on one specific Ramarsi attacker. If they can manage to concentrate all their remaining firepower onto that single ship, we might actually have a fighting chance to turn this whole thing around. Wow, it actually worked. That Ramarsi ship hesitated for just a second, and that was all the opening our battleship needed. They gained the upper hand immediately, executing this massive, crazy barrel roll right over the top of the Ramarsi vessel, and kept hammering them with fire. The commander screamed the order for the remaining fighters to disengage and get clear of the fight. The battleship rolled back to a defensive posture, using its bulk to shield the escapees, just as the Ramarsi ship started to violently rupture. It was mostly successful, but that explosion was colossal. A few of our fighters got caught in the blast and were completely vaporized, but the rest made it far enough away. It took time, but the Ramarsi threat was completely neutralized. They began their jump into hyperspace, leaving the wreckage behind. The battle is officially over, but we paid a heavy price. Half of the 32nd Fleet is gone. The rescue process starts now. The Admiral is on the comms, demanding a sitrep. We have a serious problem. A couple of ships are reporting core overload. The Admiral immediately orders them to maintain distance and focus on stabilizing their reactors while we scramble repair crews. Both ships acknowledge the order, but time is critical. One vessel begins venting its core, blasting the excess heat into the vacuum of space. The other is sending out repair crews on a spacewalk right now. Their target, the ventral hull cooling system. This is an intricate network of exterior pipes that circulates a specialized radiator fluid. By drawing in the -400-degree temperatures of deep space, it cools the fluid down to -200 or 300 degrees before routing it back to the core, a vital process, especially during high operational times like heavy fighting or those intense jump drive maneuvers. We need those repairs done fast, or this fleet is going to start coming apart. Okay, the repair crews made it. They arrived safely with those portable cooling units, just in time to get the power cores stabilized and under control. Meanwhile, the medical frigate dispatched rescue teams to all the different ships, pulling out the injured and rushing the critical cases back for immediate treatment. Then the XO came over the ship-wide comms. New orders. Gear up and armor up. We need to get over to those damaged ships right now and lend a hand with the rescues. We were scrambling around the armory, slapping on our gear and rushing into our heavy armor suits. Once we were locked in, we headed straight for the hangar bay and piled onto the waiting dropships. We got our specific orders. We're heading to the Setna. It's a massive battleship, heavily damaged, and there are countless injuries aboard. As we started launching from the hangar bay, the sergeant leaned in and started a quick final brief. We were going in to assist the rescue teams, lifting debris off the injured so they could be extricated. Once we were loaded and strapped in, we launched and headed straight toward the Setna. The pilot was on open comms, so we could hear everything specifically, the exchange with the Setna air controller. That's when we got the bad news. The landing ship was depressurized due to an explosion, taking out several craft inside. We were setting down in 0 gravity and 0 air. The sergeant barked the order. Pressurize your armor and set the gravity boots. I sealed my helmet, and you could hear that sharp hiss as the suit pressurized. Then I worked the boots on, hearing and feeling a solid thump when they finally powered up. The pilot confirmed we were coming in hot, and then we felt the things banging, clunking, hard against the hull of our ship. Finally, we began to slow down. It was a grinding slowdown, then a sudden, jarring stop, and finally, a massive thump, followed by a metallic clank. We had landed. That's when the butterflies started. We had no idea what we were walking into. The sergeant yelled at us to move. We grabbed the supply cases and rushed out onto the landing bay of the Setna. Debris, Abandoned aircraft, everything was just drifting slowly. Hit that subscribe button. All right, so we were heading straight for the airlock. It was total chaos. We had to split into teams right there on the spot. Getting through that airlock was a nightmare, people. Here, those massive equipment cases. It took forever, but we finally squeezed into the ship's interior. And what we saw hit us instantly. Complete destruction. The corridor was wrecked, debris everywhere, and the noise people were lying around, screaming and groaning. But the absolute worst part? Fires. They were blazing everywhere down the corridor. The sergeant didn't hesitate. First order, forget the casualties for a second. Put those fires out now. He knew those flames were eating up our oxygen, and we had a severely limited supply. We grabbed the suppression units, moved fast, and immediately started fighting the biggest threat to everyone left alive in there. We had to stabilize the environment first. The flames were finally out, but the real work had just begun. That corridor was thick with smoke and debris, and it was devastatingly slow going as we started clearing the path and extracting victims. Visibility was almost zero. That's where the tech kicked in. We flipped on the LiDAR systems mounted inside our helmets, letting us map out the entire corridor, identifying every piece of wreckage and, heartbreakingly, every person we found. We had to move slowly, carefully, but this wasn't just cleanup. We desperately need this corridor clear. It's the main artery. It is how we all get supplies and heavy equipment deeper into the ship to stabilize her, allowing us to limp back to the docks for those extensive repairs. It took several grueling hours just to clear this one deck, but we knew we weren't alone. Other squads were working similar scenes on every level of the ship. All we can do is focus on this deck, this corridor, and the rooms connected to it. We keep moving, one step at a time. We're moving slowly down this corridor, and here's the next room. Before we even think about touching that door, we have to check the seal. If we force this open, and there's even one tiny micro crack inside, the whole corridor could explosively decompress. And that's it for everyone here. So, the process is agonizingly slow. We connect this tablet device to the door, ensuring the room is still pressurized and perfectly sealed. It takes time, but we absolutely cannot rush this step. Once we get the green light, we can finally force the door open and check inside for victims. After we clear the room, we start using it as a dump zone, just moving all the debris from the corridor into these empty spaces, getting it out of our way. It's painful how slow this is, but in an environment this unstable, we have to be completely methodical. Several hours into the rescue, and just on our search deck alone, we pulled over 300 people out. We got them transferred to the medical frigate as fast as we could. Once our section was cleared, the sergeant ordered us up 2 decks to start the whole process all over again. It took another 7 hours just to clear that one deck. With hundreds of squads working together, we finally cleared the Setna of all the victims and the dead. The core was stabilized, which was a small miracle in itself. Now, the real job begins, getting what's left of the 32nd Fleet to the nearest shipyard, net anchorage. With help from the Wolf Pack and some Earth Force space tugs, we managed to bring the battered ships in for major repairs. It's going to be a long time before this fleet is ready to fly again. The Admiral ordered repairs for our ships, but while we waited, we were 3 days off duty. We had to report back periodically to assist in fixing the fleet. They prioritized the quick turnarounds, first miter repairs handled fast. In the meantime, the space station offered a little distraction. 2 whole decks were dedicated to recreation. They even had an area with some water and a small beach, complete with artificial sunlight. Plus, there were a few casinos, adventure zones, and several other entertainment spots scattered across those decks. The fleet started shuttling crew members over, sometimes for just a few hours, maybe a day if you were lucky. It wasn't much, but we had to keep reminding ourselves that we were in a war. We were here for repairs, not a vacation. I knew exactly where I was headed, the beach. I spent my time soaking up those artificial rays. Man, did that light feel good? All right, time to head back to the ship. I grabbed all my gear and made my way down to the transport. Once I was back aboard, I stowed everything away. Turns out, it would be a full week before most of the wolf pack was ready to jump. A couple of ships needed some serious workway longer than a week. One had massive outer hull armor damage, and another needed extensive engine repairs. The Admiral gave the order to patch up the armor as best they could. But the engine casualty? That ship had to stay in the space dock indefinitely. Only the skeleton crew remained behind. Every pilot and squad had to transfer their gear and their craft to other ships. We couldn't wait around. The clock was ticking, and we needed to get back out there, fast. We were reeling. Back at the space dock, the reports were grim. We'd lost 2 whole fleets to the Ramarsi 1 patrol, 1 battle fleet just like ours. And the destruction of that space station? Unforgivable. But now, we finally had new orders. The Admiral was sending us straight into the Omicron system. The intel suggested a critical weakness. The Ramarsi need the rare crystalline rocks found there to power their ship cores. This was our chance. The Admiral wanted an ambush, a decisive strike, to finally hit them where it hurts. The XO came on the comms, prepping the fleet for the jump. Every ship reported ready. The moment was tense, the silence heavy, and we began the long jump process. It took hours, but eventually, the stars snapped back into focus. We were in Omicron. The first scan was surprising. 0 Ramarsi ships detected, but the Admiral wasn't deterred. The commanders gathered, poring over tactical displays. The plan was set. We were going to let them come in, let them start their harvesting, and then we spring the trap. This is it, our chance for payback. We split the fleet, placing our ships into 2 key locations throughout the system. Then we deployed the fighter wings. They were the nets filling the space between the heavy hitters. We couldn't risk letting the Ramarsi slip through and harvest these precious crystals. Every large ship powered down as low as possible, and we waited. The fighters are our eyes out there. They'll tell us the second the enemy arrives and starts their mining operation. It's a nerve-wracking time, even though we're keeping up with normal duties. We just had to silence the engines and electronics. My squad, though, were locked down in the armory, prepping for the inevitable deployment. Weapons are being cleaned and repaired, sights readjusted, and we're triple-checking every plate of our armor. Just as we were analyzing the data, a crackle came over the comms. The first wave of Ramarsi ships had just appeared on the far side of the system. Our fighters immediately went on the move, pushing their thrusters to the limit. They used every planet, moon, and asteroid field they could find for cover, trying to get a closer look without being detected. Then, a pilot's voice came through, sharp and clear. He reported that some of the enemy ships had actually landed on a nearby moon. Troops were disembarking, seemingly to harvest the local crystalline deposits. The Admiral and the Commander exchanged a look of pure disbelief. They never imagined the Ramarsi would be so careless as to ground their fleet. The XO, seizing the moment, broke the silence. "Sir, should we deploy the bombers?" A grin spread across the Admiral's face. "That's a brilliant idea." Before he even finished, the commander was already on the line, ordering 6 heavy bombers armed with a planet cracker each. The trap was set. The bombers were loaded and launched. It would take them a while to get there. The Admiral wanted them to keep their engines cool until the very last second. The plan was simple. 1 bomber deploys the planet cracker, then everyone full burn back to the ship before they're caught in the shockwave. The squadron moved silently, coasting over their Ramarsi ships. The Ramarsi were just loading back onto their vessels. Before anyone could react, 1 bomber pilot fired their engines and deployed the payload. The rest lit up and began their retreat. The lead bomber released its world-ending cargo and spun out of there, racing back to safety. It was a desperate run, but they all made it. Well, all except for the first bomber. His sacrifice would not be forgotten. The bomb went off just as the Ramarsi fleet was lifting off the moon. They were completely engulfed in the blast. One of our bombers was caught in the shockwave. It knocked the engines clean out, sending it flipping end over end out of the system and into deep space. We had no choice but to wait for the shockwave to pass before we could even think about a rescue. All of us were glued to the comms, listening to the pilots frantically yelling over each other, trying to figure out a plan to catch the tumbling bomber. Finally, the wave subsided. The fighters launched again, burning their engines as hot as they could to catch up. As they raced through the debris field, the Kaiju's voice came over the comms, calling for the bomber crew. One pilot asked if they were dead. The cage replied, no, most likely unconscious. They just kept pushing, flying as fast as they possibly could. All eyes were glued to the clocks. We were just staring, wondering if they were going to make it back. We had no idea if more Ramarsi ships were on their way, and if they were, we needed the fleet ready to fight, not tied up on a rescue mission. It was so nerve-wracking. You could hear the sheer stress in the pilots' voices as they chased that bomber down. They finally caught up, but it was still flipping end over end, careening out of the solar system. The cage was just screaming their names over the comms, trying to get a response. Eventually, one of them stirred. The cage managed to talk him back to consciousness, just enough for him to fire the thrusters and regain some control. With that, the cage and a few fighters latched on with cables, and together they managed to limp that battered bomber all the way home. There was this massive wave of relief washing over us, knowing they were finally on their way back. But honestly, we were still holding our breath, still wondering if the Ramarsi was going to try and return. I cornered the sergeant, and he told me flat out he believes the Ramarsi will be back. I asked him why, and he explained it simply, they're going to miss us. For example, they might need to finish the mining operation they started, or if those ships were the only ones designated for that task, the rest of their fleet will notice the gap. I nodded, finally understanding what he meant by, they will be missed. We kept watching through the viewing window for just a little while longer, and then the klaxons started screaming. Red lights flashed everywhere. The XO immediately got on the comms and ordered the entire fleet to Condition 1. The break was over. Battle stations blared through the ship, igniting the usual controlled chaos. Crew members scrambled, running to their designated posts as the red alert lights pulsed. I sprinted to the nearest tactical screen, my heart pounding in my chest. The display lit up with hundreds, maybe even thousands, of Ramarsi ships that had just jumped into the system. An audacious plan came down from the Admiral. We were going to sneak up on them, using the asteroid field for cover, and launch a surprise attack at point-blank range. I could feel the deck plates vibrate as the ship's engines pushed us forward. Hiding a vessel this massive is no easy task, but our helmsman was a genius, weaving us through the rock and ice. The ship groaned and popped under the strain of the tight turns. Then the XO's voice crackled over the comms. They're landing on the planet. We could only guess why. There must be a massive crystalline deposit down there. We are finally within striking distance of the Ramarsi fleet. The Admiral's voice crackled over the intercom. Engines up and hot. You could feel the whole ship respond instantly. The deck plating started to rumble beneath our boots as the plasma surged through the systems. Then, with a sudden, violent lurch, the ship roared to life. We began to move slowly at first, but quickly building speed until we were right where we needed to be. Target acquired. The Admiral barked the order. All guns ready, hot. Fire at will. The noise was deafening, a continuous monstrous roar traveling through every bulkhead. The ship lurched back and forth, with the recoil of our mighty cannons. I kept wondering how much progress we were making. I know the Admiral is taking this personally. He knew the man who commanded the 32nd Fleet, and believe me, he is absolutely furious. The sergeant walked up right behind me and just asked, "How are we doing?" I just shrugged my shoulder. "I think we're doing good," I told him. We were the only ship actively pushing the attack right now, so I figured there had to be something bigger happening, enough enemy ships to make the entire fleet expose themselves like this. The sergeant nodded, told me to keep him updated, and walked off. Honestly, there wasn't much else to do. My gear was already checked, cleaned, stocked, and ready, so I just kept watching the tactical screen. A few other crew members drifted by, watched the fight for a moment, didn't say anything, and then went on their way. I know the fighting is still intense. The cannons haven't stopped firing once. And I keep seeing ship indicators vanish right off the screen. I can only assume they're blowing up. The guns went silent. Suddenly, the comms crackled to life. "All squads, man your jump ships. We are going down." Why? No idea. I took one last glance at the main screen. Just one enemy ship left, a lone blip in the blackness. No time to think. I bolted for the armory, slapping on my gear and sealing my suit. Rifle in hand, I headed for the hangar bay. It was total chaos, as always. People everywhere, running, shouting. But my squad, we just walked. We're always one of the first to load up and drop, which means more targets for us. We boarded our ship, felt the familiar jolt as it moved onto the launch pylon, and then we began our descent, plunging towards the surface below. Whatever was waiting for us down there, we were ready. Let's do this. All right, listen up. The sergeant was clear. The Admiral left that Ramarsi ship alone, just damaged enough so it can't lift off and escape. Our job is a smash and grab. We force our way in, neutralize any Ramarsi inside, find the computer core, patch into it, download everything onto hard drives, and get back up here. Simple enough, right? Wrong. The sergeant mentioned 2 other squads have the exact same mission. It's supposed to be a game, who reaches the core first. But this isn't some casual stroll. We're landing under withering fire from that ship. Progress will be slow, agonizingly slow. Those Ramarsi freaks are buying time right now to organize a counterstrike against us trying to gain access. They have no idea why we are hitting them this hard, this way, but trust me, they'll be ready. Get geared up. Let's make the Admiral proud. All right, listen up. They are not going to be wiping the core, which means we have time. Once we land, I want clean dispersal, watcher overlapping fire, and helmets on. We are landing now. Can you hear that thumping against the ramp? That's the ship's weapons fire trying to bust through, but this is a reinforced armored door. The sergeant ordered heavy shields immediately. A few of us grabbed them and linked them together to form one wide, cohesive piece, giving us plenty of cover. Then, the heavy weapons teams positioned themselves to take out the ship's point defense gun turrets. Once we were locked and loaded, the sergeant dropped the ramp. Automatically, we got absolutely pounded by those turrets. Seriously, every time one of those shots hit the shield, it felt like a car hitting us full speed. But we managed to hold the line and began forcing our way out of the dropship. The fight is on. Once the dropship was clear, the plan was simple. Get out fast, and they take off to a safer holding pattern, a few 100 meters up. It felt like forever, but after a few tense minutes, we were off the ship and they lifted away. Our first move was creating chaos. The heavy weapons opened up immediately. A massive diversion designed to keep those enemy gun turrets glued to us, not the retreating ship. We needed to push into position where our big guns could actually target and neutralize those turrets. It was slow going. Every meter was a battle, moving forward just enough to let the heavy weapons team line up their shots. They started pouring sustained fire into the nearest turret. It took several grueling minutes of non-stop bombardment just to take down one. But here's the thing, we weren't alone. Multiple squads were hitting the ground across the zone, running the same play. We just had the honor of being the first boots on the ground. All right, we've finally taken out those turret guns and are pushing into their ship. Resistance is heavy, but we're breaking their shields in these narrow corridors and pressing forward. We've already eliminated several Remarsi as we move deeper, aiming for their computer core room. Other squads are making moves too. One team is headed to secure the bridge, while another is outside, creating a diversion by blowing a hole in the hull. We're not alone, though. There are other squads right on our tail, all racing for that same computer core. We're moving fast, using a ship map to navigate directly to our target. We'll fight our way down to the core. The only other place they can wipe it is from the bridge, but our team up there will take control and eliminate every last Remarsi. Let's get this done. We finally made it to the exterior door of the computer core room. The Remarsi inside tried to barricade it, but they didn't account for the structural weakness right next to the frame. They never thought we'd just cut through the solid wall instead of bothering with the lock. We sliced right in. They had no weapons, so they grabbed whatever heavy objects they could find and came charging, but we eliminated them quickly. Once the room was secured, we got straight to the core. My squad finished downloading the critical intelligence even before the other two teams could get close to the sector. A sergeant jumped onto the comms, ordering the immediate evacuation of all units back to the dropships and off the planet. We began moving out, heading down the corridor, feeling the tension lift, but that feeling didn't last. We rounded the corner and hit a fresh detachment of Remarsi troops. Troops under fire. The sergeant yelled into the comms. We were pinned down, fighting for every inch of withdrawal. The other units that were making their way out of the ship had to turn around and double back. This gave them the perfect chance to ambush the Remarsi from behind, and they completely eliminated them. Seeing our chance, my squad fell in right behind, and we started following them out. We finally made it to the dropships, loaded up as fast as we could, and they took off. And it was just in time. More Remarsi ships were dropping out of jump space all around us. The XO approved a combat landing for us, which meant things were about to get rough. We flew in at a full burn and slammed onto the landing deck with a massive thud. We were back, but the fight was far from over. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more. Phantom Static, where the phantoms speak through the static.